I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Sarah, and together we're the co-founders of Whale Tales, a living library of cetacean stories.
Today we have more exciting guests. Woohoo!
Yay! So sit back and enjoy as we dive right in.
Today we are so excited to welcome Daren Grover to the pod. Daren is the general manager for Project Jonah, which works in marine mammal welfare, primarily in marine mammal strandings in New Zealand.
We were super excited to get to talk to him literally in between rescue strandings.
Yeah.
He squeezed us in, which was really great. And yeah, I hope you enjoy this really great conversation.
Lovely conversation.
Okay, so now we're super excited to welcome Daren from Project Jonah, all the way from New Zealand. Welcome, Daren. Thank you for being here.
Kia ora. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about our work.
Amazing. So before we get started, Daren, do you want to tell us a bit about what Project Jonah is and how it was created? Because I see from Lindsay here that you just recently celebrated your 50th anniversary, which is amazing.
That's great. So yeah, Project Jonah is I describe us these days as a marine mammal welfare organisation. Mm-hmm. So we're a not-for-profit. We respond to strandings, boots on the ground when whales and dolphins strand throughout the whole of New Zealand. However, 50 years ago, we were a very different organisation. We formed under the banner of standing against commercial whaling. So in the early 1970s, while most commercial whaling had finished, and New Zealand has got a very long history of commercial whaling. Ever since the late 1700s, the first industry in New Zealand was commercial whaling. But it had finished in the mid-1960s here. But there was talk of a shortage of mineral oil, the oil that these days we use to manufacture plastics and power our homes and our vehicles. It was believed that was running out. And so the discussions in media and on the news was that commercial whaling might restart. And that was just an unsavoury thought for a lot of people, particularly around that early 1970s period where people were starting to see the negative impacts humanity was having on our environments. And so, driven by that cause, people formed under the banner of Project Jonah, and they called on the New Zealand government to not allow commercial whaling to restart. So we were campaigners. We were advocates for marine mammals back in the day, and it was only through the late 1970s where we were successful in receiving that ban on commercial whaling, and that still stands today in 2025. We also worked with organisations overseas, and we worked for legal protections for whales, dolphins, and seals here in New Zealand. There was a flurry of countries. I think the US was probably first out of the block in the mid-70s, but in 1978 we achieved that legal protection here, and that even covers how close you can get to them when they are stranded on the beach. Normally there's an exclusion zone. We're not allowed to work hands-on with them. If it was just if you're a member of the public walking down the beach and you see a whale or a dolphin, then technically they are protected from us. But then our work in the early 1980s shifted more towards the welfare of live whales and dolphins when they stranded. We have a particularly high frequency of strandings that occur in New Zealand, one of the highest rates of events and the numbers of whales and dolphins that do strand on our shores each year, which is, it's an unwanted record for a small collection of islands at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. But what that means is we've had lots of opportunities to learn the right things to do and, of course, the wrong things, the things not to do. So these days that's where Project Jonah sits. It's not just a New Zealand focus, though. We do have connections with organisations all across the world. I sit on a global panel of stranding experts. That's a really interesting WhatsApp group. So often when you wake up, you get to see what might be happening on the other side of the world. And sometimes people do ask random questions because we're still seeing things that we've never seen before. And, there's a bit of a saying in our field that no two strandings are the same, and I can hand on heart after 13 years genuinely say that that's the case.
Yeah, and there's not a huge you can't just Google what do I do if this happens. You got to talk directly to the only other people who might have done it.
For sure. And while we want people to not do the wrong thing when they find a stranded whale or dolphin. At the same time, we want people to just simply call for help and follow the guidance given.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That brings me to a question that I've kind of been wondering for a while ever since I started really following you guys is, do you know why the strandings in New Zealand are as high as they are? I'm sure that you get this question more than just me asking.
Oh, I mean, Lindsay, that's probably an expansion of the question that when people find out what I do or what we do, what Project Jonah is, well, why do they strand? There's about 18 identified reasons why a whale or a dolphin or a pod may strand. Often it's a combination of factors. Here in New Zealand, we're quite lucky that almost half the world's species of whales, dolphins and porpoises, so that's a collective group called cetaceans, they either pass through our waters or live here in New Zealand. So 44 species we have on record of being seen down here. So with that, we've got a high amount of whales and dolphins, whether it's our almost subspecies of orca that only live here in New Zealand, and we have the Maui dolphin, Hector's dolphins, which only live here in New Zealand, or you've got humpback whales migrating past our shores and sperm whales, which are often seen, and in fact one of the only places in the world where you can actually go out on a one-day tourist trip and see sperm whales. So we have an incredible geography. We go from like subtropical to subantarctic in our long line of islands. So that means lots of different conditions. We've got deep ocean trenches that come very close to shore. In Cape Colder, you can be 1 kilometre offshore and it's almost 1,000 metres depth of ocean water. But that causes an incredible upwelling, and that's where we do have these semi-resident sperm whales like to congregate. So we've got all of these factors, and then you've got spots like Farewell Spit, which they have it's not a huge height of tidal range, but very, very shallow beaches. And the difference between a high tide and a low tide there's parts of the coast where it will expose almost 6 kilometres. The tide will go out in each tide cycle. So you're a happy pilot whale or a happy family of pilot whales coming to the bay there. You don't see the tide going out. You don't have a sloped sea floor. It is simply flat, and you can almost walk out with the tide in some of those spots. So those are some of the combinations. Our geography is probably the factor that plays into the frequency of strandings the most. And by luckily seeing so many different species at certain times of year, those two factors then do lead, sadly, to strandings. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. I knew it was something to do with geography, but upwelling for sure.
And those amazing tides. Wow. Yeah,
that's bonkers. So I know that pilot whales are definitely one of the species that get, at least in the news, one of the most prevalent for strandings. Is that correct, what you see there? Is there other kinds of species? What's the kind of more prevalent species that you get with stranding?
Yeah, so definitely pilot whales. They live in big social pods, and particularly here, the long-finned pilot whales we see, 50 individuals in a pod is a kind of average size. If we look at the record book, then we see that orca often run aground. Often that's individuals, and the orca here in New Zealand they do have a preference for eating stingrays, and so stingrays can live in very, very shallow water, whereas orca are a lot higher in the body. So quite often we will see young to juvenile orca run aground, literally swim out of the ocean after that stingray, and so then that stranding response is a pretty gentle one, looking after the orca and then pretty much waiting till high tide, unless it's of a size that we can manage and manoeuvre it back to the sea. Other than that, we see a lot of the beaked whales. The beaked whales, some species we know very little about. But the beaked whales, there's over 20 species of beaked whales on record. But the beaked whales, they spend literally almost all of their time underwater. They live in the deep ocean. They love hunting in deep ocean trenches. The Cuvier's beaked whale holds the record for the deepest and the longest dive, almost 3 kilometres deep for over 2 hours.
Absolutely wild.
Yeah.
Sadly, though, they come up on our shores, and we will, while we will respond to them, and we will attempt to refloat them. And often, what we see is a successful refloat, returning the whale to the water. Almost always, we see those beaked whales will eventually, they will turn and end up back stranded on the beach. And also, they will only survive for maybe 3 to 6 hours on average, which indicates, they're out of their natural environment. They're in shallow coastal waters with tides. I mean, their echolocation, they're seeing without sight, they're seeing with sound, is in a very unusual environment. When you consider the deep ocean, open ocean, so they're disoriented, they're stressed, they're confused. And so, they very rarely survive a stranding on the shore. But sadly, we do see a lot of those come up. And we have a spot on the east coast of the North Island with the Kermadec Trench, which is an incredibly long trench, comes close to shore there. But what happens is there's a lot, clearly, of pygmy sperm whales. So a cute wee little whale.
Yeah.
But they come up on that coast. I think we had almost over 100 individuals across the year last year strand in that region. And again, they have similar. I believe they have similar physical mechanisms to the beaked whales. And while they're a distinct, separate species, again, when they do strand, it's very rare for one to be successfully returned to the ocean. It's not to say that we don't give every whale a chance every time. Subject to assessing its health and welfare before we do refloat. But the tendency is for those beaked whales to sadly not survive.
Yeah.
The amount of difference in their environment just on a normal day, just diving and then having to breathe is absolutely crazy. So
then to deal with coastal tidal waters. Yeah.
So what is your, obviously I'm not looking for super stats, success rate, you were saying it's harder for beaked whales and pygmies, but when you have, I don't want to say a normal, but when you get a kind of a stranding of the species that is more likely to be okay, how does it work, mainly the entire kind of set of strandings? I know you have volunteers, so you get a call and then people go out, and then kind of what happens after that?
Okay, so we operate a 24-hour stranding hotline. So anybody who's got any concerns for any whale or dolphin, they can phone up and they can seek advice. So often it's a sighting, often it's someone with a concern. Sometimes, we get New Zealand fur seals, and there's a time of year through our winter where they will haul out, particularly the yearlings, the 1-year-olds.
We get those too.
You get those, good. So you understand the kind of places that they end up. People panic and people pick them up. And of course, the worst thing you could possibly do is pick a seal up and put it in your car. But because all we'll say is put it back. Please put it back. Let's put it back. It doesn't live in cars. It doesn't live in your bathtub. We've had them all. So we receive a call and we assess the call, and then if it is related to a stranding, then we do roll out a response. We work very closely with our government's Department of Conservation. They technically hold the legal responsibility for all marine mammals, but we operate under a service level agreement with them. And that means that we can respond on their behalf. We can respond, in parallel with them. We can split some of the tasks, or we can operate to just support remotely. But quite often it means us reaching out to one of our trained medics. I can talk about how we train those shortly. But then that's mobilising local medics in the region to respond and literally get situation reports, so get boots on the ground and have a look at what it is we are seeing. Because often, a lot of the reports we receive can be for different species to what they actually are. A lot of the beaked whales we've spoken about, they are often reported as dolphins. And so part of the work is trying to get a better description out of the caller. Now, for people who have never seen a stranded whale or dolphin before, it's highly emotional and it's very hard to remain rational and grounded in those moments. So part of the work I've got for our responders, or the work of our responders who are answering our hotline, is to try and elicit as much information as possible to shape the stranding response. One of the species we have here living on the west coast of our North Island is the Maui dolphin. And, a critically threatened endemic species, around about 60 individuals currently surviving. Now, if one of those live strands, the response is going to be very different to perhaps a stranding of 50 pilot whales, whether that's resource, logistics. But yeah, so we need accurate information to shape our response. And then that, of course, relies then on mobilising, whether it's people, whether it's equipment, whether it is having experts on speed dial, nationally and internationally. We do a lot of work with our local universities. But as I say, a lot of sometimes there are only one or two species experts globally in our work. And so, just reaching out to them and letting them know we've potentially got something in their field. Are they able to advise? And another tool that's actually really become useful of late is WhatsApp. Having somebody able to make a video call, have their camera facing the animal and then walking along the length of it, holding place around the head, watching the breathing rate. We can get body condition. We can look at stress levels simply with that remote triage through WhatsApp. So that's become a really valuable tool for us.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Definitely a difference from 15 years ago, and it's obviously in the late 70s. Can't even imagine if to find a payphone, I guess, in those kind of days.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, write a letter. So you were mentioning about training. You are a volunteer, and I know that there's a video that we'll put on our show notes that you sent us about training volunteers. You guys have the inflatable species that are weighted that you use for training. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I find that really cool. It's just like, obviously it looks like a pool floaty blow up, but it's actually heavy and so you get more of what the experience would be, at least physically wise, of how to move them, where to stay, how to keep them wet, all of that kind of stuff when the training happens.
Yeah, sure. So the training sessions we run up and down the country through the summer months, I'd say probably 400 to 500 adults we train each year, and this is training for anyone aged over 15. And it's simply a one-day course, but what it does is it really gives you an understanding of our marine mammals and then the key things to consider when you respond. So we have people in the classroom for about 4 hours. We fill their brains with knowledge, and then we take them to the beach, and that's where our imitation whale and dolphin come into play. So they are bespoke models. They are life-size. So one is a life-size model of a common dolphin, and one is of a young adult pilot whale. And to give them more realism, we fill them with water, which you can't do with a pool toy. A pool toy simply won't take it. So we fill them with water, and so the dolphin weighs about almost 200 kilos, and the pilot whale weighs almost 2,000 kilos, so almost 2 tons. We don't expect people to lift that up, but the pilot whale is used to demonstrate an amazing piece of kit invented by our volunteers in the mid-1980s, and that's our inflatable rescue pontoons. But the dolphin is where the key work is, and that is showing people the key principles of what you do when you first find a stranded whale or dolphin, putting into place the key work. We call it basic first aid, but it's basically it's removing all the points of stress that we can so that an otherwise healthy stranded whale or dolphin will have a better chance of surviving. And so it is pouring water over it. That classic image of a stranding response is buckets of water. But that's to prevent overheating. One of the things, particularly here in New Zealand, in the 80s and 90s, we had a hole in the ozone layer, and the UV used to be off the scale here. Luckily, there is some healing and repairing that's happened there, but even so, if you've got a 30-degree day, not a cloud in the sky, you're a pilot whale with black skin, thick layer of blubber under that skin, and you don't have the cooling effect of the ocean around you, then you will start to overheat. And within several hours, it's possible that without intervention, that whale could suffer heat stroke or heat exhaustion, and literally, it can, as it can happen to humans, the same mechanisms come into play for our stranded whales as well. And so our work of cooling them, and in fact we call it the 3 C's in our first aid. It's cool, comfortable, and calm. And that's the work we're teaching people on the training course. And so once you've completed the one-day training course, and it is only one day, you then go into our database, and there is a high possibility in future that you may be called to a local stranding. And I like to say that when you are called, you are working hands-on with wild, highly stressed animals out of their natural environment. And so there's no other one-day course you can do that gives you that opportunity.
Yeah.
It's quite incredible.
Yeah.
Over the years, we've been running this now since, I think it's over 30 years, up and down the country. We've trained thousands of people. We've got over 5,000 people in our database.
Whoa.
It doesn't mean that we'll get, we put the call out, we'll have 5,000 people turn up. That would be a completely different problem to the stranding.
Yes.
So,
Avoids the, doesn't help the calm situation that you're
no,
going for.
you're right, not at all. But as I say, we run these up and down the country, and so then we're able to very quickly filter people to their region, try and find the nearest people to an event, and then mobilise those people. Also, New Zealand, it's a real spot for people to come and do an OE, an overseas experience, for a year or more. And so we have a lot of people who come here and live, temporarily in New Zealand. And over the years, we've trained hundreds of people in that situation. And the training course, if they complete the training course and then they head back home or they carry on travelling, well, this is global knowledge that's life knowledge as well. So, I always hope that someone who I might be talking to in the class right now who may have, maybe on a travel, they may be a Canadian national, and they're carrying on training. Well, if they, in 5 or 10 years' time, they do find a stranded whale or dolphin on the beach, they remember what they learned on our course and can put that into play.
Yeah.
And there's others who do similar. And in fact, up in Nova Scotia, you've got the organisation MARS.
Yeah, I think so.
They do similar. I only mention them because late last year, on the back of the Society of Marine Mammalogy conference we had in Perth in Australia, actually Tonya from Mars, she came and spent some time with us.
Oh, wow.
And in the UK, in Australia, there's several groups that we've assisted over the years and we work with and benchmark our training with regularly to make sure that what we're doing is still relevant and seeing what might be emerging in different parts of the world, working with different species.
Yeah, I'm thinking now like pilot whales versus humpbacks, because we've had some humpback strandings here, not successful. Sperm whales, do you guys get just the pygmies? Or just, that's intense.
No, big ones as well.
The big ones. And right whales as well, correct?
Well, the right whales are only just coming back to mainland New Zealand.
Okay.
We have southern right whales here, and there's subgroups all along this kind of south of Australia, in this Australasian region. There's some that migrate up to Australia. We're just starting to see them, the southern right whales coming back to the main islands of New Zealand, simply because they were overhunted. They were hunted to local extinction, and it was almost 70 years that southern right whales weren't seen in mainland New Zealand. However, about 15 years ago, the first one was seen after almost 70 years. And we do have a few now that migrate up our coasts through our winter. They don't go further north than New Zealand, but yeah, we've got a handful now that are slowly making their way back. And it's thought that the first one of those may have been alive during the time of commercial whaling, and has slowly been finding its way back to those old grounds, those old safe passage routes along our coasts.
Yeah, that's actually a conversation we were just having with the people who work with North Pacific right whales on our coast, who, again, the whaling, they could have been alive when the whaling ended, so they're just trying to figure out how to get back into doing what they do without being killed.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I have two more quick questions about the species. Can you tell us a little bit more, mainly just about New Zealand's cetaceans and kind of more like the seasonal, like you guys have migrations, or sometimes, like you said, right whales in the winter, humpbacks in the winter, trying to do the math thing in my head while I say this as well. What does it kind of look like there throughout the year, species-wise?
Yeah. So I'll pick up on that point about humpbacks. Yeah. So the humpback whales right now, they're all down in Antarctica, and they are building up those blubbers. They're doubling in weight. And then during our autumn, they will start to swim north. And our autumn kicks off in kind of March, April time. And they will be swimming north, and they'll be swimming up to the tropics. And so for them, that means you've got the Kermadec Islands, you've got Tonga, you've got Niue. So they will be swimming up there, and then they will be gathering with other individuals. And there they will be mating, or if they mated last year, then they will be calving. They'll be giving birth to new calves. And then in our spring, they will head south.
Yeah.
And then again, that circle then completes. So in our summer, they'll be down in the coldest part. And of course, what you're seeing is you're getting knowledge, traditional knowledge passed from generation to generation. So the calf will stay with the parent group for at least a year, and during that year they will know where the safe feeding grounds are, where the safe gathering grounds are, and the safe migration passageways, pathways as well. So that knowledge will get passed from generation to generation. We also have, as I say, we've got our resident orca. And they will work their way around, particularly around the North Island. We do see them in the South Island as well, but I think there's more reports in the North Island simply because we've got a far greater population of people in the North Island. So that correlates as well. But the way that social media is these days, you pretty much know where most of the subgroups or the pods of individual orca are these days. And then you've got certain areas where, again, you will see our endemic species. So traditionally our Maui dolphin live just on the west coast of the North Island, towards the north part of the island, a very narrow range that they live in. And then our Hector's dolphins live mostly around the South Island. Although we do occasionally have a few outliers, some outlier sightings, a few adventurous ones that might cross to the North Island. And then, people scratch their heads and say, well, is this a Maui dolphin or is this a Hector's? And
I don't think I could tell them apart.
No, I couldn't, I think you literally have to weigh them and measure them. So you have to have them out of the water to understand the differences. So I like to think of it more as a regional difference.
Makes it easier.
And then we have, we do have common dolphins, and we have bottlenose dolphins as well. Particularly, bottlenose dolphins live. There's two key areas where they are regularly seen and regularly in habitat, and one is in a Fiordland National Park, which is in the far south on the west coast of the South Island, where there's almost zero human population. But there's some happy. I say happy because their numbers are stable. Is probably what happiness means.
Steady population of.
A steady population of bottlenose dolphins there. We have seen some changes in population, particularly in the far northern area called Bay of Islands. When the European settlers came to New Zealand, some of their naming conventions were pretty boring. We have the North Island, we have the South Island, we have the Bay of Islands. All of these areas do actually have Māori names. So the South Island is Te Waipunamu, the North Island is Te Ika Amaui. So there are names, but when talking to people overseas, I do try and keep it simple, dare I say. No offence to the audience, but another interesting species we have is a semi-permanent population of Brutus whales in an area called the Hauraki Gulf. Now, the Hauraki Gulf is the main body of water just to the northeast of Auckland, our biggest city. Being our biggest city, it has our busiest port. Now, studies in the late 90s showed that there was a population of about 150 to 200 Brutus whales, approximately, in that region. However, we were seeing, on average, 2 Brutus whales a year die and wash ashore. More often than not, as a result of ship strike. And so studies by University of Auckland found this data out, and it was then proposed a voluntary slowdown code in that region. And so a lot of people on the water, a lot of people trained and taught what to look out for Brutus whales. And when a Brutus whale was seen, GPS coordinates were put out, an all points bulletin on the Coast Guard radio, not Coast Guard radio, Harbour Master radio, for people to slow down and avoid that area. And the success of that, we went from 2 a year, and I think we had something like maybe 1 or 2 in 10 years.
Wow.
Die as a result of ship strike.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So that's a great model of us being able to adjust our behaviours. It is something that's being investigated and looked at in, for other ports here in New Zealand. And I know that's a less sophisticated solution to what's happening for like your northern right whales on the eastern seaboard. But that's definitely something that's worked here. I mentioned the sperm whales, and also something that was discovered about 10 years ago was a gathering ground for pygmy blue whales here in New Zealand. We occasionally saw them, and very rarely, once every 2 or 3 years, there may be one wash-up beach cast, dead. Mm-hmm. But in an area called the South Taranaki Bight, which is towards the south of the North Island, there was a study conducted, and over 600 individuals were counted in that region. Yeah, and there was some tagging work done, and strangely, the one that was tagged did a circumnavigation of this entire South Island, started in that region, went for a 1 month lap, and then came straight back to that region.
So check out New Zealand, I guess. Yeah.
So we knew there were a few out there, but when we started to look, that's what we found. So we've got that huge range of species that we see. If I circle back to our pilot whales, we do see them stranding in particularly this time of year. We've had 3 mass strandings of them in the last 7 weeks on mainland New Zealand. But while we know there's a tendency for this to happen towards the warmer months of the year, we just don't know where they are when they aren't close to shore. There's the occasional sighting of them, but of course, we humans aren't out in the ocean. There's very few people out there, and whether any sightings are being reported, they're not making it, to us. So we simply don't know. And I'd love to know where they are when they're not here. Where are they heading to? Why do they tend to have a tendency to strand in certain spots? We have a collection of islands called the Chatham Islands, way to the east of the South Island, and we've had a series of major events there. I'm talking strandings of more than 200 individuals. We've had maybe 4 in the last 3 years, and the largest stranding on record in New Zealand was in 1918, where over 1,000 pilot whales came up there. Even today, the population out there is about 600 to 700 humans. And so with a stranding that large in a remote spot, and it's not, there's I think there's maybe 2 or 3 flights a week from the mainland out to the Chathams. So getting assistance there is next to impossible. And it's a beautiful wild place. But as a result, there's got beautiful wildlife there as well, and it sits on an area called the Chatham Rise, and there is an uprising of deep water, shallow water, and all of that combines, and the whole oceanic food chain, really kicks off out there. And as a result, everything kind of gathers there. And of course, what might predate on injured, struggling or dead whales is, of course, sharks. And there's a lot of sharks seen in that region too. So that's also a factor that complicates matters when there is a stranding in that region.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so you briefly hit into a stranding that happened in 2024, and I would love to know if you had any encounter with the spade-toothed whale that came up.
No, you're right. The spade-toothed whale. So I don't know if you know the story, but this species is only known from I think 4 or 5 skulls that have been discovered. One on an island called White Island here in New Zealand. I think a couple from Chile, and there might have been 2 others from a beach on the east coast of New Zealand. So when this individual did wash ashore, only recently having died, again, people started scratching their heads, and we were like, right,
it's
okay.
Weird looking, that whale.
Well, but to the uninitiated or to the inexperienced, beaked whales look weird. Anyway,
yeah, that's true.
They do look weird. So, but when you start looking and you start getting the reference books out and looking at these beaked whales that all have these variations, we start to scratch our heads. So, that was incredible. So to have one relatively intact and to have the opportunity to take a look at it, to take a look at it physically, and to learn so much. And that's the second species of beaked whales, which has kind of put New Zealand on the map of beaked whales as well, if you like. Because on the west coast of the South Island, an individual came up in about 2011, and it was taken up the beach and it was buried, and the site was marked. Some measurements and photos were taken, but the identification, the record books, and Western science was checked. And again, no indication of which species this was. And so the skeleton was exhumed, and measured and scanned, and this knowledge was shared globally, and no evidence of which species this was. And so the person who discovered it, a Māori lady by the name of Ramari Stewart, pushed hard for it to be recognised, and eventually, I think in 2021, it was recognised as a new species. Again, sadly, only ever seen dead. But yeah, Ramari's beaked whale. That is the name of the species. It was named after the person who discovered it and worked hard for it to be recognised. And it's the first whale. It has two points of recognition for this whale. It is the first whale named after an Indigenous person, and it is the first whale named after a woman.
That's amazing.
We are very proud that Ramari's beaked whale is has that recognition, because Western science, you go through the record books, and again, like New Zealand, the naming of whales and dolphins is kind of our right whales were the right whales to hunt. The rough-toothed dolphin, oh, come on, there must have been a better name or distinguishing feature than that. So. Yes, to have a whale named in such a way, we're incredibly proud.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, so just one more thing I wanted to ask you before we move into our segments, and that is, again, to do with I think it's to do with your anniversary, which is your new humpback, humpback whale?
Yes.
Is that something that, because of your anniversary, or did you just coincide when it arrived?
It was very fortunate timing.
Nice.
Yes. So we've really been building a schools education piece to align nicely with the adult education, the marine mammal medic training piece. And so several years ago, we were visiting a handful of schools a year, but we were seeing such incredible impact on the people that we were speaking to that we built that program. And last year, I think we presented to almost 11,000 children across the country. Yeah, in maybe 300 to 400 presentations, but that's face-to-face presentations, and we find the value of face-to-face presentations are so much greater. Online education is great, but there's something particularly when we're presenting to children that actually being able to be there, to have an imitation whale, just like our adult training whales have an imitation whale, tangible things that we're able to do to create core memories. Well, we saw this resource that originated from the United States, and it's a life-size humpback whale, so it inflates. I like to say it's more like a hot air balloon than a bouncy castle. It's a lot lighter. The pump runs all the time, though, like a bouncy castle. But within its belly is a classroom. So we can bring 15 to 20 children into the belly of the whale, and it's anatomically correct inside. There is you can see the skeleton, and then you've got all of the internal organs, and we can, it shows like the size of the throat. So here's a whale that's 13 meters long, but yet its throat is only as big as your forearm. So a whale that with such a big mouth, and the way they feed, they're baleen filters. They filter huge mouthfuls of water. Well, they are prone to obviously ingesting ocean-borne waste, whether that is floating plastics or similar. And with such a small throat and esophagus, they are prone to that, having blockages, and then that leading to malnourishment, and ultimately, that can kill a whale. And so we're able to create awe and wonder, and I used the phrase just now of core memories. Yeah, and to hold these creatures in front of mind, and so we also we don't hold back on telling children about climate change and the impacts of climate change on their environment as well, but being able to demonstrate it on a creature so big, it doesn't fit in most classrooms. It literally has to go into the school hall or the sports hall, and then you can take all the children in and introduce them to it, and then spend the day in the school going class to class to class and having them meet the whale. And so that program starts next month when the school term starts here in New Zealand, and we cannot wait to see what the impact is going to be of this program. Yeah,
so exciting, man.
No, I want to spend the day in the whale. That sounds great.
But it gets a little stuffy after a few
probably,
seconds.
But...
Well, you say that, but the pump is permanently pumping fresh air through it. So actually, it doesn't smell like a whale, luckily.
Yeah, that's good. I was thinking it would smell like teenagers, but
true. Fox.
But yeah, like, so I don't know, we always used to do like, you know, the parachute kind of thing, like in like primary school kids, and you like throw up the parachute and you tuck it under your bum and you get inside. And like, I have such strong memories both as a kid and then later, you know, as a educator doing programs inside of there. And I can't even imagine if it was something as impactful as a life-sized humpback whale.
Oh, that's so cool.
So yeah, just that connection and that memory making is so amazing.
Yeah.
And we've had just as many adults, actually. Oh, we had a lot of adults reaching out saying, "Oh, is this when we started showing pictures of it on social media?" They're like, "How do adults get to experience this? I never got a chance to experience it when I was a child." So we're trying to find ways. You know, there will be school holidays. So what do we do with the whale during school holidays? So so watch this space. We want it to be accessible. We want every school that requests it to be able to deliver. At the moment, it is regionally limited because it's a reasonable size around. And so we've had some amazing funding bodies come on board, and they've also funded us an educator to present it for a year. So we've got all the resource there to create the biggest impact, to get it out there, and really hoping to shift the dial when it comes to thinking about the actions individuals can take and the impacts they might have.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Amazing. Thank you so much for that.
Before we continue with the rest of the episode, we want to take a moment to tell you about how you can support our podcast and everything we do at Whale Tales.
You can join us by becoming a patron at patreon.com/whaletales. You can join for $1 a month at the porpoise level, $5 a month at the dolphin level, or $10 a month at the whale level.
And each level comes with a variety of perks like polls, postcards, access to extended interviews, extra stories guests share. You can even produce your own Fun Flipper Fact segment of the pod. Plus, our dolphin and whale level patrons have access to an extra podcast that we do every once in a while called Journal Club. Kind of every other month, we read a journal article and we discuss our thoughts on their findings. So if you would like to hear even more of us in your ears, think about becoming a patron. We have a lot of fun over there. Thank you, patrons.
We do have a lot of fun, and it's a wacky time. If you think we're wacky now.
Patrons get all the wacky.
Oh, we should do like a Whale Tales After Dark one day.
Oh boy. But thank you, patrons, for all your support. You are amazing.
If you aren't able to support us financially, there are still things you can do that would help us out and help the podcast out. You can leave us a rating or a review on your podcast platform of choice, like Apple or Spotify. This will help other people find the podcast, and you can also just tell people in person about your podcast that you enjoy listening to so that they can listen along too.
Yay! Plus, you can follow us on social media at whaletales_org and send us your feedback so that we can keep making the podcast even better.
We're just going to move into a couple of our segments that we ask everybody on the podcast. And the first is our Fun Flipper Fact. Nicole is not here to sing, sadly, but we still would love to hear a cetacean fact that you like to say. It can be about any species.
Okay, well, I had to think about this. My Fun Flipper Fact is a blue whale's poo would fill a bathtub.
What? I've never actually thought of that before. People always talk about poo and the blue whale color and poo's color in general, but the amount of that is the volume.
Yeah,
that's a really good one. I like it.
Yeah. So it's about 150 to 200 litres, it's believed to be. So, yeah. And of course, it is quite watery because it's done in the water, but apparently it's more like breadcrumbs when it's evacuated. So, yes. Mm-hmm. And I was going to expand on that and talk about why, what causes it to be different colours, but sounds like that's been covered.
Yeah, you can mention it again. I don't even know if it's been on here before. That's just a thing that I know. I do have a 6-year-old nephew, so that could be the reason why
6-year-old nephews know a lot about poo.
They really do.
So it can change colour depending on what it's eaten. So red for krill, yellow to green for anything phytoplankton, plant-based, and if they've been eating fish, it will be anything from tan to brown.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Interesting.
So cool. Our sort of the backbone of what we do at Whale Tales is collecting stories and sharing those stories. So we were hoping that you could maybe share an encounter or a story about seeing whales in the wild with our audience, if you've got one that you'd like to share.
Yeah, there's a few that come to mind. I'm just not sure which is most compelling. I mean, personally, going to Vancouver and going out and seeing the orca on the water and learning all about the orca up there was incredible. You know, how they are separate, you know, literally they are subspecies, how they don't have a common dialect, how they don't have, how they have different diets and seasonality and movement. But being there in a just a little RIB inflatable and having this huge male dorsal fin break the water and come out of the water and rise and rise and rise, and looking up at it, it's so huge. And then the whale breaks the water and rolls and looks up at everyone on the boat. And you're like, yeah, okay. And I know that's a cliche when it comes to orca, but the genuine scale. I've worked with orca, you know, at strandings, and we've got one or two very large individuals, but I don't think we had anything as large as, you know. I think that whale was probably over 9 meters long. You know, we were in a 16-person boat, and it was bigger than our boat.
Yeah, we've got some really big boys up here.
I say, other than that, we had an interesting encounter actually at a stranding in December last year. And in a pod of pilot whales, you get individual personalities, and some express themselves more than others. And we were during the stage of the refloat. So just rewind, set the scene slightly. So we've got 19 pilot whales that had stranded as part of a larger pod. Some individuals sadly hadn't made it, but the tide's starting to come in, and then and what we do is we refloat pilot whales all at the same time on an incoming tide, because they are heavy. They're hard to handle out of the water because they are quite delicate despite being heavy, and so we use their natural buoyancy to aid them with that. Plus the tight social bonds that led them to strand as a pod. Those we use them as an advantage to refloat them together at the same time. And so I'm usually in an oversight role. I'm usually looking at people and their behaviours, looking at the whales and see if there's any needs that need to be met in the moment. Well, I'd helped refloat one whale, which was off to one side of the pod, bring it into the bigger group. As I've released control of that whale, I've moved to a group of 4 people who had a larger whale who was doing a lot of thrashing, showing signs of stress. So lifting the tail, and it's still on its belly at this moment with about water halfway up its body. So it's feeling the urge to swim, but it can't yet swim. And there's 4 people, and they're really struggling to hold this whale in place as it's thrashing. So I've come up to the whale, and I've asked the 4 people, you can just stand off, and we'll let the whale calm down. And so 20 seconds or so, the whale rolled onto its side, and it did slow down in its thrashing. So then I've reached in, and I've just rolled it back up onto its belly, and it took a calm breath, and the thrashing passed. So I've said to the 4 people, I said, hey, that's great, I can look after this whale. If you want to, please distribute yourselves amongst these other whales as this tide's coming in. Well, about 20 minutes later, one guy who had been with the whale when it was thrashing, he's walked past, and he said, can I help you with that whale? Because there's me on my knees at the side of this whale that's like 5 meters long. It's huge. The tide's still coming in. And he's like, because not, and 4 people on a whale that big to hold it in place is about right. He's like, can I come on the other side and help you hold it in place? And I said, yeah, sure, come on in. So he's come in, and he's opposite me. We're in the middle of the whale by its dorsal fin, on our knees, facing each other. And within 20 seconds, this whale starts thrashing its tail, lifting its head, arching its head. And I said, all right, let's stand off. And I've looked at him, he's looked at me, and I've said, I'm really sorry, I don't think this whale likes you. And he looked at me, and he looked crestfallen. He really was like, oh. And I'm like, look, it is a thing. They have personalities. They get a vibe off of people. And I said, I don't know whether it's maybe something you're wearing or whether it is, just a vibe. And, while you can't measure vibes scientifically, genuinely, this guy stepped away, this whale calmed down. So... And so when we say they have different personalities, you just go to the dog park and look at the different personalities in dogs there, and it's very similar with whales. We could have 50 whales on the beach, and there'll be 3 or 4 that just won't settle. They maybe just don't want people around them. Others, they're fine. They associate our actions with meeting their immediate needs, and they calm right down. But some whales, they simply just won't settle. They don't like the environment. They don't like the people. They don't like our vibe. And like I say, it's not measurable in any kind of scientific way, but it is something that definitely happens at a stranding, and no doubt it happens, in a pod of whales as well, naturally.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. We've seen when the residents here, when the individuals so well, you can tell their personalities, and in a heightened situation like that as well, definitely they come to an extreme, and it's just, and one of those things that you'd never be able to measure and prepare for. You just have to deal with in the moment. Yeah, sure. That's fascinating. Yeah, so many interesting things. Great. Okay, so the one last thing that we do ask all of our guests is a call to action for people to help with marine life around the world. Obviously, we spent most of the episode talking about strandings and responding to strandings and helping stranded whales, so that's a huge part of what you do. So is there any other big or small call to action that you would like to share with people that you think could help?
Well, I think a lot of people, there's a phrase which I don't really believe in, is a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. And I think a little knowledge is really, really helpful. Yeah. And I think the knowledge of your impacts on the marine environment is under such huge pressures, and we depend on it, not just for food. A huge percentage of the global population relies on the marine environment for food and sustenance, but simply to scrub the air that we breathe. The ocean performs so many roles, and we're still discovering many new things. And our dependence on that environment is it's essential to our survival. And so, just consider. There's actions we can take. Here in New Zealand, in the surfing community, I think they talk about, always when you walk off the beach, always take a piece of rubbish off the beach with you. Leave it better than you found it. And then whales and dolphins, we can visit their environment, but that's their home. So consider the impact you have personally on that environment. And, we talk about sunscreen's effect on corals. There's that impact. There's the impact of the types of, if we are going to be eating fish, then the impact on the types of fish and how it's caught, where it's caught. Let's consider, we can choose. We're one of these, we're in such a time of plenty that we can choose and make decisions that can limit or change our impacts on the environment. And so looking at our whales and dolphins, which were on the brinks of extinction, many species as a result of our commercial whaling, going full circle here to the start of our conversation, these populations are bouncing back, but they're going to face the pressures of climate change just as much as we are. So if we can limit our negative impacts as best we can, and if you're able to create positive impacts, whether that's helping a local community group, whether that is with a beach cleanup, or whether that is other action that you can support, whether that's financially or through time, then please do that, because we all can have a part to play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really great. It's important, there's like these big things that we can do, obviously, with what you're doing, and also, but then there's the small things, and then there's the overarching whole picture kind of things.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Fantastic. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap up here?
No, thank you. It's been an incredible opportunity to talk about our work, and I always end up after these conversations, I'm empowered by our work because. Getting to represent it, getting to talk about it. The work we do looks simple. The work we do is, potentially life-changing and life-saving. And so never assume that the actions that you might see on a news segment are necessarily the correct things to do. If you are able to seek guidance and advice, please always do that. Whether go online and find your local, marine mammal experts, or make that phone call and follow the advice given. A phrase we never use is common sense, because that goes out of the window when we're working with whales and dolphins. A lot of people don't realise that whales, they breathe air. They live in the ocean, yet they breathe air. They are ancestrally linked to cows and deer and antelope. So. If we can start to think of them in that regard, yet they live in the ocean, they have this, this disadvantage, but they have found an evolutionary niche. Follow the advice given and don't ever make assumptions around nature. Yeah. That's
a perfect way to end on a great rule of thumb for anyone in the world. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
For sure. Awesome.
Thank you so much, Daren.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was just delightful. Yeah, so great to chat with you.
We would love to hear your thoughts on this or any episode, so please visit our website, whale-tales.org, to find links to all of our social media handles so that you can drop us a line.
You can also find Project Jonah at facebook.com/Project Jonah, Instagram at Project Jonah NZ, as well as on LinkedIn, and projectjonah.org.nz.
As you might have heard, especially if you are local, a very important to us, and I think important to the cetacean community throughout British Columbia and maybe even throughout the world, the Whale Interpretive Center in Telegraph Cove. A huge amount of Telegraph Cove was destroyed by a fire last month in December. And in particular, the Whale Interpretive Center is running a fundraiser to try to rebuild their facility and recover from that. So we've put a link for their fundraiser in the show notes, and anything you can do, even just sharing that link with folks in your community, would be much appreciated. It's a huge loss to the understanding and the communication of whales off our coast. So thanks for your consideration.
Absolutely. It's devastating, and just every little bit helps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In lighter news, we are going to be doing another mailbag episode in March, and that is also Dolphin Awareness Month. So we are specifically looking for dolphin questions. If you have them, we want to answer them. If you don't have them, but your friends do, send them to us. And tell them about the pod at the same time. So the deadline to get your questions in, if you want them to be answered during that mailbag episode, is February 19th.
Yeah, and you can email us, comment on social, comment on Spotify, because that's the thing that you can do. Send us a voice memo. Can't call us because we're millennials and we won't answer. But, there's lots of different ways. Just get in touch and let us know. And killer whales do count for dolphins if you're really wondering how pedantic we're being. So Send in your killer whale questions if you have them.
Great. While you're at our website, you can also subscribe to this podcast, learn about supporting us and becoming a patron, and check out over 1,500 whale, dolphin, and porpoise stories. 1,500! Amazing.
That is incredible.
That's what happens when I have 2 weeks off.
That's whale-tales.org. Tales like the story, not tales like the animals.
And if you've seen a cetacean, we would love to add your story to our library. You can click the share link on our website, or you can contact us on social media. We're at whaletales_org. Or you can email us a voice memo and tell us all about your incredible cetacean encounter.
Finally, we want to acknowledge that we recorded today's episode on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples and the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, as well as the homelands of the Tsawwassen First Nation.
Daren joined us from Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Thank you all so much. We hope you have a whaley great day.